Hello. Good morning, everyone. First off, thank you so much to the coalition and all the folks for inviting me to be a part of today's discussion. As Rebecca mentioned, my name is Gustavo Torres. I am the Director of Youth Advocacy here at the Campaign for the Tobacco-Free Kids. The campaign, we've been around for over 25 years, really advocating for policies that help to reduce tobacco industry's deadly toll across, not only here in the United States, but across the nation, across the globe, actually. As we know, the tobacco industry has been relentless in their marketing and advertising of their products, really selling death and disease for generations. And at the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids for the last 25 years, we've been really working to combat this with some really innovative and great programs, specifically looking at the role of policy and how we really address this issue from the root of by changing policies specifically, really allows us to follow the science and the data. We know that by raising the sale of tobacco products to 21, it helps to reduce youth initiation. We understand that raising tobacco taxes is critical and for price-sensitive young people, but also consumers as a whole. When you increase tobacco taxes, you help smokers quit. At the campaign, we really understand the urgency of this current issue as we're talking about flavored tobacco products, which we'll dive a little bit into today. We've seen dramatic rises in youth e-cigarette use rates, and it's really important for us to really follow proven policies that help to reduce tobacco use and really save lives. And so what we're going to talk a little bit about today is really understanding what some of the data currently is, what it looks like across the country, but then further, what are we doing to actually address this issue, and what are we all doing collectively together to really end the sale of flavored tobacco products? So as we've seen specifically, we know, flavored tobacco products are really putting a whole entire new generation at risk for addiction. Specifically, when we look back in 2009, as most of you all know, the federal law, the Family Smoking Prevention and Tobacco Control Act, really prohibited the sale of cigarettes with characterizing flavors other than menthol, no surprise. And in the years following that, tobacco companies has continued their tradition of designing products that appeal to new users, that help to step up the production and the marketing of flavored non-cigarette tobacco products, especially e-cigarettes and cigars, which is one of the current challenges we're actually really seeing. As we know, when we pass really great policies and we continue to take huge strides forward, the industry is always looking at ways to modify and shift and pivot their marketing and pivot their product and the diversity of products that they're offering as a way to really continue to attract young people. So we know flavored tobacco products are just as addictive as regular tobacco products, and these products are really undermining the overall effort that we've been able to really make in reducing youth e-cigarette use rates, but overall tobacco use rates. Really, as we know, it is putting our current generation at risk for nicotine addiction and serious health harms, because again, is with a lot of these new products, we don't have the long-standing research that really even shows over time the true impact. But every single day there's new studies and we continue to learn more, and there is overwhelming evidence to know that nicotine is addictive. We all know that nicotine impacts the developing adolescent brain, and so it's critical that young people are not becoming addicted to these products and really falling into the tobacco industry's trap. Tobacco products are now available, as you all know, in a wide variety of flavors, and it really is starting to think like you're walking into a convenience store. It's starting to look a little bit like a candy store or ice cream parlor nowadays. you have gummy bear, cotton candy, peanut butter cup, cookies and cream. There's all of these variety of flavors, and it is no surprise that these products are really geared towards young people. We know flavors and menthol help to mask the harshness specifically, but then flavors are really appealing, which was one of the main reasons why the Family Smoking and Tobacco Prevention Act really helped to remove these characterizing flavors, understanding the impact it's having on young people all across the country.
Misty Lee,
So,
join the meeting.
So it really is no coincidence. The tobacco industry knows that flavored tobacco products appeal primarily to young people and new smokers. 8 out of 10 kids who have used tobacco products really started with a flavored tobacco product. And when you think about that, and we think about the work that we have to continue to do, young people are attracted to the flavors. Obviously, the industry has done a really great job of even marketing these flavors towards young people, but that's why it's critical that we end the sale of flavored tobacco products, including flavored e-cigarettes, menthol cigarettes, and flavored cigars, as a critical step for us to stop not only the youth e-cigarette epidemic, but really to create the first tobacco-free generation. There really is a growing movement of policymakers at all levels that are really focused on prohibiting the sale of flavored tobacco products. And currently there's 5 states and dozens of cities that have actually really taken action to address flavored tobacco products within their communities. And once fully implemented, these laws will actually protect 25% of the country's population. That's including 17.7 million kids. The tobacco industry really does have a long history of targeting. And I think one thing that we will continue to see is that their targeting is widely successful, especially to young people. So when we're looking at some latest data specifically, and I know this is the part where folks sometimes get a little bit overwhelmed with all of the different numbers. But one of the things that we say specifically when we're looking at the data is the data tells a really clear story. In most instances, we know that, latest data shows that kids really aren't just experimenting with e-cigarettes. Many of these young people are using these products most days or every day, which is a sure sign that they're actually on the path, if not already addicted. Nearly 40% of high school users use vaping tobacco products over the last 20 days. But specifically when we look at middle school students, you start to actually see that middle school students are having starting tobacco products, which we know is really derived around e-cigarettes. And when we look at 20 plus days a month, while we've seen some declines, one thing that we actually have seen, young people, especially as we're looking at middle school age, are using these products at staggering rates, 20 plus days a month, which that is definitely on a path to regular use. So when we look specifically and start diving into high school, and again, looking at, the latest data from the National Youth Tobacco Survey, we see that, there's some good news and some bad news in our effort to reduce the youth e-cigarette epidemic. The biggest thing is that youth e-cigarette use is still an epidemic. The good news is we've seen the decline in significant use between 2019 and 2020 from 27.5% down to 19.6% of high school students. So, but we still see that 1 in 5 high school students are still using e-cigarettes. And really the bad news here is youth e-cigarette use remains at epidemic levels, with 3.6 million middle and high school kids actually currently using these products. In fact, we're far from actually reducing the alarming increase of youth e-cigarette use rates that has really started to occur in 2017. As you see, we had these huge spikes. And the 2020 decline really brings rates back to about the same level of 2018, when the US Surgeon General first declared youth e-cigarette use as an epidemic. So it is a trend that isn't necessarily a trend. It's not just a fad. This isn't really going away. What we've seen is e-cigarette use continues to rise. And while we have been able to remove specific flavors off of the market, we've seen a huge increase in disposable products. So there are growing concerns truly around the rise in e-cigarette use, specifically amongst high school students. And so this is really where, again, it's so critical for us to really address flavors and the root of flavors um, uh, through policy. And we'll talk a little bit later around the importance of what the FDA can do, what Congress can do, but more importantly, what you all can do at a local level. So as we've seen, and many of you all are very familiar, we continue to see a variety of different flavored tobacco products. There was some research done around 2017, and there were more than 15,000 unique e-cigarette flavors that were currently on the market. An earlier study found that more than 400 brands were available online in 2014, and 84% offered fruit flavors and 80% offered candy and dessert flavors. So again, when you look at this and you look at the packaging and the bright colors, it's really no coincidence that we see such high use rates amongst young people. So the benefit, one of the great things in January 2020, the FDA issued guidance that restricted some flavors in cartridge-based e-cigarettes, but it exempted menthol flavored e-cigarettes and left flavored e-liquids and flavored disposable e-cigarettes, which again are widely available in every imaginable flavor, whether it's at your corner store, the bodega, like anywhere you go within your community, you're going to see advertisements for these products, especially young people. So the tobacco industry continues to push really their sleek, colorful, flavored tobacco products to the market, really trying to compete against each other for the youth market. So when we actually look at e-cigarette flavors, this is where we start to see some really large numbers as it relates to the National Youth Tobacco Survey. We know, again, youth are really sensitive to price, but also flavors are really appealing to young people. And so when you look at high school e-cigarette use rates, again, we are at such staggering use rates amongst high school students. And this really goes to show that while we've made some progress and while FDA has decided to pull some flavored cartridges off, and while there's been some work, the problem is not going away. The industry continues to adapt and young people continue to utilize these products. But another huge concern is when we were talking back in 2009, when flavored tobacco products or flavored cigarettes specifically were removed from the market, one huge challenge and concern were the fact that flavored cigars were actually left on, there was a loophole built in which did not address these products. And as you all know, is these cigars are cheap, sweet, and really easy to get. When you have 2 cigars for 99 cents for the price-conscious consumer, it would make actually these products are really appealing to them. So when we look at cigar use, really cigars are as popular as cigarettes amongst high school students. So if we look really overall, you see the trends are pretty consistent here. So again, as you think with high school students being price conscious, these products being easily acceptable, along with the variety of flavors, of course, it would really be appealing and attractive to young people. Specifically, when we start to dissect some of the data, we start to see how these products actually impact a variety of different communities differently, right? So specifically, while African-American youth smoke cigarettes at much lower rates than their white or Hispanic peers, cigar prices, again, with often 2 for 99 cents. They're really popular amongst African American youth as well. And so when we look specifically, kind of looking at menthol, as we all know, is menthol use is at its highest, or use is highest amongst African Americans and youth smokers. Menthol is something that, as we know, it's in, all tobacco products, small traces amounts of menthol in cigarettes, but truly in menthol cigarettes, really are easy to initiate with for young people. Specifically, it masks the harshness, and really, as Dr. Gardner would say, makes the poison go down smoother. And this is really a huge concern, because we start to look then at the health disparities that are actually existing and how the industry is targeting specific communities for death and disease. And they have been doing this for decades. They have fought against policies to include menthol cigarettes, menthol specifically, because they understand how critical it is to their market, but further, how it really does help in initiation. And so when we're also, looking at the rates, it's important to look at the intersectionality of tobacco use within other communities and populations as well. So when we really look at the preference for menthol, it is also really high amongst the LGBTQ population. When you look at tobacco users who with mental health or socioeconomically disadvantaged populations, or even pregnant women, you actually are seeing high menthol use rates as well. And really, I think this is how this is really where it's, the data is very clear. And for a lot of us who've been in tobacco control for a really long period of time, it feels like we continue to make a lot of really great progress. We get to a point, and the industry just starts pivoting, pushing back, and continuing to be multiple steps ahead of us. But it does not mean that we will not be able to create the first tobacco-free generation. And this is why collectively, our collective voice, from the local, state, and even national level, really need to come together to really take action. So we know that FDA should issue a proposed and final rule to prohibit flavored e-cigarettes, flavored cigars, and menthol cigarettes. FDA's action has, while they have mentioned, they will do a lot of things, as we've seen in most recently, that they are going to issue a proposed rule. We're not there yet. And so until we are there, it's so important that we should continue to push Congress to prohibit the sale of flavored tobacco products, including menthol cigarettes. But also, and I think kind of more importantly, is we really need to focus on states and localities. Really, at the local level is really one of those things. It's so important for us across the country to really start moving these policies, because we cannot wait for the government to act. Our communities, our young people, are at risk and are continuing to fall to the tobacco industry's tricks. So this really is an opportunity for us. And I know in South Carolina, you guys have really battled with preemption, and we're so fortunate this year to beat it back. Unfortunately, a lot of other states and localities were not as lucky as you all. But the passionate folks like you all, and the passionate folks are going to continue to not allow preemption to impact their work. So again, main focus is really looking at, all right, what are we going to do right now? So currently with the FDA's action, as we know, they are going to initiate a rulemaking to prohibit menthol cigarettes and flavored cigars, including menthol flavored cigars. So while this is, again, one huge step forward in protecting kids, and really looking at advancing health equity across the country, it really is something that will have a huge impact to really not only address tobacco use at its core, but really take these characterizing flavors out, specifically menthol, which will and really the tobacco industry's predatory targeting, specifically of Black communities. We know that the policy really is has the potential to really
Amanda Stephanakis
change
joined the meeting.
dynamic of our work, knowing that it will not only help to protect young people, it will help to protect communities that have been most impacted by big tobacco. But more importantly, there's an overwhelming amount of evidence and support to really address menthol tobacco, understanding that this will have a great benefit on communities all across the country. So back in February, and I say, last year, it seems so ancient ago, as the pandemic has really just wiped a lot of time away from us. But really back in February of 2020, the House of Representatives passed the HR 2339, which is the American Lungs and Reversing Youth Tobacco Epidemic Act. And this was really huge. This was a really huge step for Congress and a huge step for our country. This bill would have prohibited the sale of flavored tobacco products, including flavored e-cigarettes, flavored cigars, and menthol cigarettes. But it didn't just go there. It went so much deeper. It really looked at extending advertising restrictions that currently apply to e-cigarettes to smokeless tobacco products and other products, including e-cigarettes, really requiring the FDA to promptly implement the graphic health warning labels on cigarettes and advertising that's required under the 2009 Tobacco Control Act. Again, the 2009 Tobacco Control Act was passed, and still 11 plus years later, we're still waiting for the FDA to make moves on some of the decisions and some of the components that were within this act. One of the main challenges that we know, again, is every time we move forward, the tobacco industry is going to continue to challenge our work. But I know, just like you all, is none of us are shy from a challenge. And so we really continued to really focus on pushing FDA, and this bill was one piece to really help to do that. But I think one of the most critical things that we need to remember and we need to continue to talk about is that this bill also really focused on funding for cessation initiatives. It is so important that we continue to focus on cessation as we are addressing our policy work, having tailored, appropriate cessation services, not only for youth, young adults, and adults, but really looking at the communities most impacted and providing services to really help support their effort to become tobacco and nicotine free. So as we really start to kind of look forward, we understand, again, as I mentioned earlier, states and localities really should restrict the sale of flavored tobacco products. You know, we continue to play a waiting game when we are working with the government or the FDA specifically, as we've seen. But the one thing that we know each of us have is the passion of community and the reason why we continue to show up, because it is for our own individual community. When I started in tobacco control, I started because my mom used tobacco products and I really wanted her to quit. And I got involved locally, and that was really what drive my passion to see, all right, what can I do within my community first? These are the folks that I'm seeing, my friends, my family, every single day. And since that point to where I'm at today, I've continued to advocate and fight for community. And that's really, one passion point for me, but also as we really look to move and address this issue that we're facing, is really coming back to the local level and remembering that local communities really can have a huge impact, which all of you all have done by beating back preemption. But it also shows that there is a road ahead specifically for you all, to really continue to push progress, to continue to focus on policy solutions that really help to ensure that we are protecting communities. So by ending the sale of flavored tobacco products, looking at other strategies through that policy lens will really help to continue to put you guys in a position to really address not only the growing concern amongst young people, but just the community overall. So, and sorry about that. So at this point, just want to say thank you all so much. We'd love for you to check out more of what we're doing specifically on flavor bans. We have a lot of really great resources available on our site, but we also really look forward to continue to work with all of you all as we work to address this issue.
Gustavo, thank you so much. That's some really terrific information. You all, we're going to do the same as yesterday, where we are going to take questions here in the chat box, and between Gustavo and I, we'll get them all out to you. There's a question here. I'm going to kind of do a summary version of it from Mike Cummings, Gustavo. So a lot of the folks who are really focused on harm reduction maybe don't completely support the ban of flavors and are very interested in the idea of reducing the nicotine content in cigarettes and the tobacco products. Can you speak a little bit about TFK's position on that?
Yeah, I think, at TFK, we definitely agree with reducing nicotine to non-addictive levels. We understand that by reducing nicotine to non-addictive levels, then that would definitely be another game changer. It is one strategy that is continuing to be elevated and discussed at all levels, understanding that that would really have a huge impact. I think the other challenge that we really do face as well is we have to look at tobacco use rates and flavors and who's really utilizing these products and these flavors. And unfortunately, the impact is young people. And we know that when young people start using these products at a young age, they are then becoming addicted for more than likely a substantial part of their life. We know nicotine is addictive, and the challenge is the long-term effects of nicotine on the developing adolescent brain makes it more important, where we do have to start weighing the risks here. And so I think, again, it focuses on the importance of really identifying what works best within your own individual communities at varying degrees and varying levels. But we do have to just be really, really mindful that, these flavored tobacco products are impacting a generation of our young people dramatically. The data and the science shows that. So really, at what point do we continue to let the tobacco industry specifically use our young people as guinea pigs for a lifetime of addiction?
Thanks. Can you speak a little bit about what we should expect in terms of a time frame of the FDA moving? I mean, I know you're not a genie with a magic ball, but what should we be expecting? What's realistic? And then, of course, I think we're all expecting there's going to be lawsuits too. So what do we really think is going to come down the pike with that ruling?
Yeah, I think you touched on two things. First, the lawsuits of the industry. I mean, litigation is the industry's best friend. While sometimes you could delay, again, a group of passionate, committed people will always prevail. I am 100% in alignment with that. But I think specifically when we're talking about the rule, this could be, at the longest, a number of years, right? I think the reality is we're really hoping under this administration really addressing the issue early, knowing that back in 2009, a lot of this work started, and unfortunately, we're at a point where the industry has continued to market, manipulate, and innovate ways, products specifically. and really pushing back against sound policy and sound decisions to help reduce the impact of tobacco within communities, which, help to continue to line their pockets. So I think, FDA we've seen is really slow and dragging their feet. And this is why when some folks say, oh, well, FDA is going to do that. They said they were going to do that. This is why, we shouldn't, we don't need to move forward on local or state policies. Yeah, and in 2009, the FDA said that they were going to do a lot of things as well. And we are here, over a decade later, and we're still, fighting for some of these same issues we've been fighting for time and time and time again. But I think I am very hopeful that we will be able to move the FDA substantially over the next couple years. But again, if we are not continue to put pressure not only on the FDA, but if we are not also working through policy at a local level, all of these things really, it's important for them all to really work in concert together to really help move us forward. But hopefully within the next year or so, we'll start seeing more substantial movement timelines. And I know for sure at the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, we're not going to sit by quietly, and we will continue to push them to act.
Thanks. I have another question I'm thinking about as Director of Youth Advocacy, and that's your area. Tell us a little bit about the value of having youth engaged in advocacy at the local levels, because I think that's what we're looking for over the next year or two in South Carolina, is to build our advocacy capacity, kind of starting from grassroots up to the state level. And tell us what you've seen with youth engagement and how that makes an impact.
Yeah, well, first, I can say I'm a product of what authentic youth engagement looks like, right? As a young person, I was engaged. I started in the 7th grade. Went to my first tobacco, I saw a sign. First off, it said free pizza. And I mean, just like most young people, we are food motivated. And I still said we. I hope you caught that. But young people are critical to the movement. Young people are the ones that are most impacted by policies that are being enacted in their community. But also, they're the ones who are being faced with this epidemic firsthand, in school, whether it's just trying to use the bathroom or the pressures from their friends or the pressure that is applied through social media and advertising and marketing. Community at the root, the people who are most impacted should always be at the table. And young people have continued to make huge strides in moving this movement forward. But I think, we look at this issue because we want to train young people to work on tobacco and work on policy specifically. But at the Campaign for Tobacco for Kids, our approach really is training young people in the advocacy process. So how does this process work? How do you really understand how the system is operating around you? And we really focus on that experiential learning, which definitely provides, not only sharing, how do you do effective messaging? How do you effectively engage decision makers? How do you work with the media? How do you plan fun, engaging events? But through experiential learning, teaching, and then putting into practice in real time really helps to build skills that are key transferable skills, and some call them soft skills. I really call them essential skills for young people that really help for them not only to build up their advocacy on this issue, tobacco control, of which they're passionate about, but further that self-advocacy and that continued growth. So it's so important, I think, not only for us to engage young people to feel so connected and rooted to our work, because this is our why, but also in knowing that we are providing young people with true tools and resources that support their personal and professional development as well. So it is so critical that young people not only have a seat at the table, but if they don't have a seat at the table, or the table is not near or accessible to them, to make sure we're taking those young people to those tables. And then, as I say sometimes, if there isn't a seat at the table and you've taken a young person to a table, then feel confident enough that you could sit back in the room as they stand on that table to make sure that their voice is heard. While young people sometimes are discounted because, they can't vote, the reality is elected officials really listen to young people because these are their future constituents. These are, the young people who are living within that environment, and this is their livelihood.
One more quick question about that. Where do you find, or where have you found it successful to, I don't know what the right word is, not solicit, but to engage young people, or to promote to young people opportunities? Because there's so many issues going on right now for all of us to be advocates about, especially young people. How would we identify prospective young advocates in the tobacco work?
Yeah, well, I think, the biggest thing is, as you all know, as a coalition, it's really built around partnerships. And I think partnerships are the biggest way for us to build relationships. A lot of times we look at one-way partnerships, but we have to look at ways that it's mutually beneficial. So how are we working and supporting other groups, other issues, other causes that are aligned with ours that could help to, again, engage back with our issue as well. And so looking within the school environment, looking within student government leadership, we have national partnerships with FCCLA, which is Family, Career, Community Leaders of America, which is really rooted in family and consumer sciences within the educational system. Looking at building partnerships with local youth groups to share the opportunities. But I think it goes back, this is where it's so important as we start to identify within the community some of these groups. What are we offering the young people that helps to reduce tokenistic approaches to engagement, where young people are feeling like they are active participants rather than a bystander that's being flagged over to say, hey, can you come hold this sign? When you allow young people to express their creativity, you will be surprised by the true outcome. But more importantly, when you provide a platform and you're building that advocacy skill set, on this issue, other groups will see that, right? They see that this isn't something that young people are just showing up to. This is something that young people are engaged with and walking away with true tools and resources. And that's
Whoop, you just went to mute.
and that was one of the main things that we've developed at the Campaign for Tobacco for Kids, was our Taking Down Tobacco online youth advocacy training platform. Was really a tool to help train young people in the advocacy process. And this is a tool that we've used to share with other partner groups to help support in that.
Okay, thanks. There's a question in the chat box. What, if anything, is TFAK doing to address campaign finance reform? The convenience store industry, along with big tobacco, are really influencing state legislators in South Carolina against public health policy to protect the health of our youth.
So what I will, I don't know that answer. So I just want to be very clear up front. I do know on the call today, we have Megan Kissel, which is our regional advocacy director with the Campaign for Tobacco Free Kids. So I'll pull, Rebecca will work to pull the chat and we'll make sure to get back to you, and then we could get this back to on that.
Thanks. And I think you touched on this. Megan from here asked, oh, let's see what we got down there. So Megan asked, what do you see as the best way to get across to localities the importance of continuing their local efforts while not undermining the movement by FDA?
Yeah, well, I think, the biggest thing is, simultaneously, as we're really working to push FDA, it's important for us to really look at comprehensive policies, right? So on a local level, that means we have to address e-cigarettes, we have to address flavored tobacco products like cigars, and we have to address menthol tobacco. And that isn't necessary to even undermine, some of the direction of really where we need to go, but also to ensure that we're we're really pushing inclusivity that encompasses all of the communities that have been most impacted by tobacco. So it's so important for us to really look at comprehensive strategies, but anything that's being done on a local level will definitely have a huge impact. And while we're doing some of the work on the local level, it also there will be continued opportunities, for instance, on our Take Action page at tobaccofreekids.org to really sign a petition that helps to push the FDA in this direction. So I think it's really about dual approaches. Yeah, so I'll just.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Gustavo? I was filling some gaps. We were waiting on you all. I think you've answered probably most everything that we were interested in. You pretty much covered in your presentation. So I think that we will move on. Thank you very, very much, Gustavo.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, everyone.